Elon Musk never mentioned her name, but when he accused a popular TV host of covertly ruining careers, the internet pointed directly at Rosie O'Donnell, and the result was chaos. It began with a single sentence, no hashtags, no names, just Elon Musk sitting in a darkroom live on stream at 12:41 a.m. His voice was low and deliberate, and you'd be surprised at how many Hollywood careers were buried by people smiling on TV. The chat went crazy a few seconds later. He added that one of them had a talk show. So he smirked, paused, and then went on to discuss a different story. But the internet didn't move. Users began pulling clips, guessing names, and going down rabbit holes. But a pattern began to emerge. Talk show host Keisha Lattimore was in the middle of an episode of an outspoken, controversial, and sharp-tongued podcast based in Phoenix when her producer slid her a phone. She looked down, raised her eyebrows, and said, "Hold up, Musk's talking about Rosie." The connection wasn't even confirmed, but Musk knew exactly what he was doing. After his 2-hour stream, he logged off, said nothing more, no follow-up posts, no explanation, just silence. But people weren't waiting. Numerous side-by-side video clips of Rosie ejecting visitors and former interns discussing a difficult work environment surfaced on TikTok. One of her show's monologues, in which she ridiculed everyone for cutting them off if they cross a line, was either humorous or confessional. A former stand-up comedian named Gene Fairbanks shared a grainy video from a holiday in a Flagstaff parking lot. "Listen, I opened for Rosie once in 2001 in LA, and she told me straight out that if I continued doing my set, I'd never make it. A week later, I lost 2 gigs. Perhaps that was coincidence, but I don't think so now." The comments were divided. The story continued to spread, but then something odd happened. Elon's fan base, which was typically focused on tech stocks or outer space, began looking through Rosie's old interviews and discovered one from 2003 in which she said, "There are too many people in this business trying to get famous for nothing. I make calls when I need to." That sentence struck a different chord, and by morning, Rosie's name was trending in 14 countries, and still Elon hadn't mentioned her name once on YouTube commentary channels. This was despite the lack of concrete proof. Not a single accusation. Only Musk's tone, smile, timing, and vast reach at 9:14 a.m. A video showed a woman named Justine Hartwell, who now resides in Santa Fe, claiming to have worked as a segment coordinator on Rosie's show. She claimed that she didn't yell or throw things, and that all it took was one call from her to remove someone from the lineup, without giving a reason. I had assumed it was just TV politics, but some of those guests never returned to any shows, and there were still defenders. No matter what Elon is insinuating, comedian Deshaun Minter made a response video on the same day. When the network failed to introduce me to agents who truly took me seriously, Rosie gave me my first break. The battle lines were quickly forming, and then Elon made his first move after my stream at 10:32 a.m. He tweeted, "We mean 2 OM. Sometimes the mask slips, especially when they think no one is watching." Below them, there was a blurry screenshot of what appeared to be a 2004 legal settlement, with names redacted and one paragraph highlighted. That was all it took. But people wanted proof that this was more than just a rumor. So Rosie didn't wait long. By noon, her publicist had released a succinct but scathing statement to Variety. When Rosie herself went live, it wasn't a staged press conference or a polished Instagram reel. It was just her sitting in her kitchen in New York City with a mug of coffee in front of her, no makeup, and a hoodie on. The lighting was harsh, but she didn't care. "Let's get straight to the point," she said, staring straight into the camera. "I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I've pissed people off. I've said things I regret, but I never destroyed anyone's career ever." She took a breath, her voice quivering just enough to demonstrate that this wasn't just damage control. Miss O'Donnell won't entertain vague, baseless accusations from billionaires trying to divert attention from their own mounting scandals. I've watched Elon Musk's little stream and his cryptic clues. If you want to play detective, go ahead, but dragging my name into some conspiracy fantasy, that's where I draw the line. It wasn't a typical Rosie tirade. There was no punchline, just the kind of hurt that settles behind the eyes when someone feels betrayed, not by one person, but by the entire world turning on them all at once. Within minutes, clips from the live stream were all over Facebook, with mothers who had grown up watching Rosie's daytime show fiercely defending her. She gave a platform to LGBTQ voices, working moms, and children with disabilities. One user wrote that she wasn't perfect, but she cared. However, beneath every defense, there were responses laced with suspicion. Some pointed out Rosie's long-standing reputation in the industry for being sharp, confrontational, and not afraid to burn bridges, while others weren't so kind. When Rosie appeared on the Chat Hour, a well-known podcast hosted by comedian and longtime friend Brenda Keogh, the tension increased even more that evening. The tweet read, "Hollywood is full of people who smile on camera and stomp on people backstage." Weeks in advance, the show was supposed to be a humorous walk down memory lane, but as soon as the camera started rolling, the tone changed, making you want to go there. Brendan nodded slowly when Rosie asked, mentally bracing herself for the interview. I'm not going to pretend that I was easy to work with. I had standards, and I was under pressure from network executives, sponsors, and audiences. I told many people no, and some of them didn't like it, and some probably still don't. Brenda tilted her head. But did you blacklist anyone? I don't know what you call it when someone is toxic and unprofessional. But if I thought they were going to cause problems to the team, I might have made a mistake. Rosie looked away for the first time that day, and her voice fell. I may have made a few mistakes, but I wasn't attempting to destroy anyone's life with that one tape. On TikTok and YouTube, a few clips were altered, slowed down, and played millions of times. The question suddenly changed from did she to who after people froze it in time and created whole stories around it. By 8 p.m., gossip sources were naming lesser-known comedians, stage performers, and writers whose careers ended in the 2 years. None of them had any public connections to Rosie, but the internet was making connections between them, some of which were genuine and others of which were entirely made up, and the pressure mounted on both sides. Musk hadn't tweeted anything else after the hazy settlement DOC, but Rosie's podcast segment was already a national headline as the discussion moved from gossip to morality, from rumors to reckoning. Rosie's silence returned no tweets, no follow UPS, not even a like or a retweet. In a 2-minute segment on The Feud, one guest referred to it as a modern-day witch trial, while another said that this is accountability, not cancel culture. However, the public wasn't finished listening, and behind the noise and clips, other voices were beginning to speak, including those who had been in the room when Rosie made those calls. The next wave came from people the internet hadn't heard from in years, including former staff members, assistants, backstage crew, and comics who had been working hard since the early hours of the morning but had never quite succeeded. It wasn't from Elon, Rosie, or anyone else. First, a name appeared on Reddit. Vince Drayton wasn't well known or viral, but some people did remember him from a few late-night shows in 2002. He warmed up for studio audiences before going missing. In a 12-minute YouTube video that was uploaded from his Fresno one-bedroom apartment, Vince discussed his time in Hollywood in a way that he had never done before. Vince stares directly into his phone's camera. I'm not sure if Elon is being completely honest, but I can tell you this. I had a development deal. NBC, when I was 26, one of Rosie's producers came to see me perform at the Laugh Stop in West Hollywood. The following day, I was called into an office and told that my show concept was being shelved without providing an explanation. A week later, another comedian with much less experience received approval for a show that was very similar to mine, and I discovered that she had appeared on Rosie's show twice. He paused. I'm not claiming that Rosie personally made the call, but the timing was really convenient. Even though the video only received 14,000 views in its first day, it set off a chain reaction that led to the appearance of other names. I used to love her then. I worked, there was the opening line of a TikTok posted by Janine Cordosa, a woman who had interned on Rosie's show for 2 summers while in college. The comments poured in, with some thanking Janine for her honesty and others accusing her of clout chasing. But there was something different about her tone, not angry, but disappointed, like someone who had once admired Rosie and now couldn't make sense of what she'd seen. Janine didn't accuse Rosie of yelling or physical abuse. Instead, she described her behavior as quieter and more corrosive. She would make jokes about guests who bombed during commercial breaks, call them names, and say things like they'll never be back. In an Instagram live Mel Trainer, a segment producer who worked with Rosie from 1998 to 2002, offered an alternative perspective. She was undoubtedly tough, but she stood up for those who were excluded and pushed for the inclusion of queer voices on television, when no one else would. She even got into heated arguments with network executives over this. So don't erase everything just because Elon Musk wanted diversion. Mel's voice broke near the end, and I witnessed her fight and cry in her dressing room. She wasn't always right, but she wasn't a monster. The comments were split once more, with some stating that Rosie was kind to some people and cruel to others, and that she had favorites that perhaps she wasn't even aware of the power she possessed off camera. Then something happened that completely changed the tone. An anonymous email purporting to be from a writer's assistant who had briefly worked on a sitcom that Rosie had executive produced in 2006 was leaked to the Daily Register, a mid-sized publication with headquarters in Tempe, Arizona. The email detailed an incident in which Rosie allegedly demanded that a guest star be removed from an episode because she wasn't funny enough and brought nothing to the table. The actress, who was only 23 at the time, was replaced, and her career stalled after that. The email concluded that she didn't scream or swear, but her word was final. Elon made another move just as the public was beginning to form their own version of events, and this time it was more difficult to ignore in the steady stream of testimonials. The studio in question did not confirm or deny the story, but online detectives quickly figure out which show which actress. And again, Rosie did not issue an official denial. The picture that was emerging was not one explosive act, but rather of a pattern that was subtle, sharp, and effective. Not loud, cruel, or quiet control. Elon broke his silence. It wasn't a dramatic thread or another live rant, just one post timestamped 3 a.m. from his X account. Some people build empires, others build silence. You decide which is more dangerous. Attached was a photo, not a meme, not a joke, a cropped image of a legal document with nearly every line blacked out, except one in consideration of the mutual agreement to avoid litigation. The respondent agrees not to pursue future media opportunities in relation to the 2001 incident or its professional repercussions. No names, no locations. But Musk's followers were already on it. Within hours, the hashtag #RosieAgreement started trending. People dug up old articles, blurry PDFs, old chat room transcripts from comedy message boards. In the early two theories, multiplied theories turned into proof in the court of public opinion. A user named at Throwback Comedies posted side-by-side screenshots one of the lesser-known people pieced together whether or not they belonged to an actress named Kelly Braun who disappeared from the public eye in 2001, and another from a blog post she wrote in 2005 about being abruptly blacklisted after a failed guest appearance on a daytime talk show. But Elon wasn't finished. Later that afternoon, he posted again, this time linking to a YouTube video called The Joke That Got Her Cut. The video, which featured a 40-second clip from an unaired rehearsal of a daytime show in 2000, showed a young, nervous woman on stage who was obviously trying too hard. She made a joke that didn't land, and the camera quickly cut to Rosie off screen, but it was clear that she was saying, "Jesus, get her off the set." The original file had reportedly been part of an internal network archive, but it had been leaked and people couldn't believe it. The voice did sound like Rosie, but there was no official confirmation, no date stamp, and no context. For many, it felt like the last nail. YouTube commentators paused the frame where Rosie's voice appeared, replaying it and captioned it, saying things like "cold-blooded" or "there is backlash" swelled. Fast brands that collaborated with Rosie on voiceover commercials for charity initiatives in recent years, reminiscence shows, started taking her names off of their websites. Her name was discreetly removed from a homepage of one foundation that had recognized her in 2019 for her lobbying efforts, but some people weren't convinced. When questioned directly why this isn't about justice, tech journalist Anarius said that it's about deflection during a Twitter chat. Since it works, and she wasn't the only one who questioned motive, Elon is now shifting the focus to someone else while still facing criticism for the harassment lawsuits at X and the Tesla stock decline. Later that evening, Elon changed his focus once more when he appeared on the Logan Shaw Show, a hugely popular live talk show streamed from Austin, Texas. When Logan brought up the Rosie drama, Elon leaned forward and grinned as if it were all fascinating trivia. Elon's detractors called him a chaos merchant, someone who thrives on distraction and controversy, and others accused him of targeting women, specifically older female public figures who once held power but were now easier to overthrow. The last line, "I'm not saying anything," he said, "I'm just putting information out there so people can decide for themselves whether this is a wake-up call or if it's just showbiz." For many, it sounded like code, reminding them of the many secrets that had been buried over the years under that same excuse. The internet hadn't seen everything yet, because one old recording was about to turn the story on its head. The leak didn't come from a journalist or a verified insider. Rather, it came from a podcast archivist in Wichita Falls named Ronnie Gaskin, who spent the majority of his free time digitizing old VHS tapes and uploading them to a specialized YouTube channel called Talk to You Vault. Rosie's team remained silent. She didn't go live or post anything. Ronnie wasn't attempting to create drama. In fact, he was unaware of the Musk-Rosie feud until a subscriber messaged him. "Dude, check tape number 141. When he checked, he discovered that the clip was from a backstage segment shot in 1999, in which Rosie was sitting in a makeup chair, hair pulled back, and casually conversing with a small crew. The microphone was hot, and the camera was tilted slightly to the side, making it obvious that the video was not meant for broadcast. Someone mentioned a new actress who was executive produced by Rosie. I advised Greg to pull Rosie because she's not ready, and to be honest, she's really annoying." One of the staff members off camera laughs nervously. Rosie chuckles. "Oh, please." Rosie goes on to say that the video is poor quality and that if she's wise, she'll return to working as a waitress in LA. Although the sound crackles, it is unmistakably her voice due to its rhythm, tone, and crisp delivery. The 30-second clip was all over the place within an hour. Creators of TikTok analyzed every comment made on Twitter. Some claimed it was a joke, with Rosie being her usual direct and disrespectful self. Others claimed it validated everything. When late-night host Carson Mayfield played the clip during his monologue, he raised an eyebrow, suggesting that Musk had been hinting that it wasn't about a single incident, but rather a pattern, attitude, and power trip. There was some rough stuff, but the segment didn't end with laughter. I suppose Rosie was working in HR before HR even existed. Carson remarked, "You don't get to call yourself a mentor while kicking people down behind closed doors," with a grave expression on his face. News outlets ran headlines like, "Was Rosie O'Donnell the queenmaker or the executor?" and featured debate-filled comment sections as the pressure became intolerable. Some blamed the industry for allowing such behavior for decades, while others defended Rosie for doing what they said every Hollywood executive did, but never got caught. Then, in the midst of the storm, an anonymous user posted a comment on Reddit. "My sister." Rosie joked that she didn't work in television after she came home crying, and that joke was ruined. No name was given and no more posts appeared, but it lingered believable, and for many, it was the last straw. The podcast where Ronnie had uploaded the clip, that was barely known days earlier, received over 1 million views in less than a day, and news crews showed up outside his small Texas home. He didn't answer the door, and a handwritten note taped to his window read, "I'm not doing interviews." While Rosie was still silent, some fans pleaded with her to speak, while others advised her to keep quiet. One user wrote, "Don't say anything, you'll just make it worse." The brand began to publicly sever ties, putting a planned reunion special she was scheduled to film in Boston on indefinite hold, and a college that had invited her to speak at its spring event had discreetly replaced her with a lesser-known novelist. E.T. Online, her silence became a vacuum, and in that vacuum, more E.T. Barsharn vacuum, further tales surfaced alleged comments, exchanges in a rehearsal room, contemptuous remarks. Not all the accounts were confirmed, and some were contradictory, but the pattern seemed too consistent to ignore. Nevertheless, some people continue to ask why Musk would leak this information. Was it about Rosie, or was it about Musk demonstrating his ability to manipulate the internet with a single smirk? Before anyone could respond, a voice spoke up who had been silent for over 20 years and claimed to know the entire story. Her name was Dawn Leffridge, and she was once thought to be one of Rosie's closest allies. In 2000, Dawn was a writer and segment developer for The Rosie O'Donnell Show, and in magazine interviews, the two had been photographed together at charity events, quoted side by side, and even took vacations to Palm Springs with their respective families. Abruptly departed the industry, no public explanation, no interviews. She just disappeared from the scene. That changed when Dawn published a pun 200-word op-ed on a small but respectable digital site called Lines Between, with the title "Working with Rosie was the best and worst experience of my career," and it Dawn told the truth, or a version of it. without taking sides, attacking, or making excuses. Dawn explained the atmosphere behind the scenes. Rosie was sharp and brilliant, funny in a way that you couldn't teach, and she lit up a room, demanded excellence, and gave me opportunities one never would have imagined. The op-ed spread like wildfire. It didn't demonize Rosie, but it didn't protect her either. It was balanced and honest, and in an online debate full of shouting, it felt quiet, and real people who had once taken hard stances started to soften, even on Elon's side support. He wrote about long nights rewriting scripts, guests getting bumped at the last minute, and a general air of fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of disappointing Rosie, or fear of being replaced. Yes, but did he actually reveal a sinister secret, or did he only manipulate public opinion? A journalist ex-Thread Ty Franklin presented it clearly. People listened because, although Rosie's reputation had suffered, Elon's intentions were now under just as much scrutiny as they had been a week earlier. They asked whether it was justice, if it came from someone with an agenda, on a panel for Talk News Tonight. Elon isn't the hero here. He didn't break a story. Instead, he curated outrage and stirred the pot UWA just enough to let it boil over. He did this to bury his own headlines. But let's not claim he is the truth teller either. Jordana Ziegler, a cultural analyst, put it best. What we're witnessing isn't accountability. Rather, it's billionaire chess, and Rosie is merely a highly visible player. Despite this, Rosie stayed silent, leading some to think that she was seeking legal advice and others to assume that she was shocked. Some speculated that she might never return to public life at all, but more subdued dialogue was beginning to emerge amidst the commotion. People started telling their own stories about a workplace culture power dynamic that straddles the line between toxic behavior and tough leadership. On Facebook, a former casting assistant posted, "I've worked under women like Rosie, who are intelligent, ambitious, and cruel. I don't excuse it, but perhaps we should stop creating environments of fear and labeling it ambition." News sites picked up the comment. Perhaps the thing that hurt the most was how the focus of the podcast changed from scandal to structure, from one woman's actions to the system that had permitted them. Elias Guerin, a now famous screenwriter and Emmy winner, posted a 7-minute video from his home in Santa Rosa. This moment changed the course of the conversation because, for the first time, someone who had directly benefited from Rosie's influence was willing to tell the entire story. Rosie was an anomaly. Rather, he was a symptom. However, as the conversation progressed, there was one last twist. Someone Rosie had once helped rise felt compelled to speak, not out of rage, but rather because he hadn't spoken in years, not in public or on record. Elias sat calmly on a worn-out leather couch with slightly misaligned glasses. "I met Rosie in 1997 at a benefit in San Diego. I was working 2 jobs, camping on sofas, trying to get into TV. She read a comedy. I writ and laughed, and gave me her assistant's number a month later. I was in New York pitching ideas. She gave me a shot on her set. And for a while I thought that meant she was untouchable, generous, brilliant, and scary as hell. But then his voice slowed down and became more deliberate. One day, I pitched a segment that she didn't like, and she simply stopped talking to me, and we stopped meeting. I never received a response to my emails, and my name vanished in the credits. Rosie built me up and then erased me while Elias stared straight into the camera. Although I don't believe she intended to destroy me, I do believe she forgot that people like me were made of hope, not armor." The final line of the video, "People aren't puzzles you can put down when you're bored," struck a deep chord because it revealed how easily powerful people, even those with good intentions, can forget the consequences of their words, choices, and silence. The following day, Rosie finally broke her silence with a typed statement. "No podcast, no video. I've seen the stories, heard the voices, and I won't pretend it doesn't hurt. I never intended to hurt anyone, but I acknowledge that my actions, whether deliberate or not, had effects. I sent a single paragraph to a few prominent sources and reposted it in its entirety. The reaction was mixed as expected, with some calling it too little, too late, and others seeing it as the first adult moment in a sea of drama. However, as the media cycle cooled, the deeper questions remained. Who gets to define harm? Who decides when a powerful person is changed enough to be welcomed back? And is there redemption in an industry that thrives on blame but rarely allows for it? I was a product of a system that rewarded dominance, and I played the game to survive to those I hurt. I'm sorry, I won't make excuses. I can only listen, reflect, and try to do better with whatever time I have left in this industry. Grace the moment stayed with Elias, who continues to write but now mentors young creatives who feel voiceless. It stayed with Don Leffridge, who stated in a follow-up essay that the industry will change only if the people in power remember they weren't born powerful. And it stayed with viewers not as a scandal, but as a reminder that behind every public figure there are private stories. Musk never responded to Rosie's statement. In fact, within days he moved on to the next controversy concerning government surveillance and AI regulation. Tangled, intricate, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, the moral power doesn't always corrupt, but it always reveals. And in a society that's constantly watching the way you treat people, when no one's looking might just be the loudest thing you ever say subscribe if you believe the truth isn't always loud, but it always finds a way to surface.